"Is this your husband, Miss Calloway?" The question sliced through the ballroom so cleanly that even the string quartet seemed to lose its place. 1 second earlier, the Calloway Foundation Gala had been glowing with champagne flutes, white lilies, polished granite, and the soft confidence of people who believed money could keep panic outside the doors. Then a little boy started wheezing near the coat check, clutching the front of his gray sweater vest while the adults around him froze. Marcus Doyle was not supposed to be noticed that night. He was only the facility's technician in a faded green work jacket. The single father who had taken an extra shift because the electric bill was due Tuesday and his son Eli needed a new backpack before school started again in Portland. But when he heard that small ragged breath, something older than fear moved through him. He dropped his flashlight, crossed the room, and knelt beside Eli before anyone even knew the boy's name. "Look at me, bud." His voice was quiet. "In through your nose, slow, like you're smelling fresh bread." Eli trembled, tears catching the amber light. "Dad, I can't." "Yes, you can. It's scary. I know." He held one hand behind the boy's back and pointed with the other toward a sealed side door near the coat racks. "That door's jammed. Somebody open it now. He needs air, not an audience." The security guard grabbed his arm, assuming he was just another employee out of line. But Marcus didn't pull away. He didn't raise his voice. He only looked at the man with a calm that felt heavier than anger. "My son has asthma," he said. "Move, please." That was when Vivian Calloway arrived. Ivory gown brushing the floor, sapphires at her throat, her expression composed but her eyes awake with alarm. She was the woman everyone had come to photograph, the chief executive whose foundation had pledged $4 million for pediatric clinics across the Pacific Northwest. But in that moment, she didn't look like a headline. She looked like someone watching the world decide whether a child mattered. "Open the door," she said. No one questioned her. The guard stepped back. The physician from the donor table hurried over, saw Marcus holding Eli, saw Vivian kneeling beside them, saw the way the boy's fingers had curled around Vivian's sleeve as if he'd always belonged there. Then he asked the question, "Is this your husband, Miss Calloway?" Marcus lifted his head immediately. "No, sir, I'm just—" But Vivian saw Eli's face tighten, saw the shame rising before the breath had even returned, saw a child preparing to be embarrassed in front of a room full of strangers. So she placed her hand gently on Eli's shoulder and said, "He's with me." 4 words, soft, clear, impossible to take back. The room changed around them. The guard lowered his radio. The physician listened to Marcus's instructions instead of talking over him. The donors stopped whispering long enough to watch the boy breathe again. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you believe in dignity and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories matter, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus Doyle, who had no idea that the most powerful woman in the room had just protected him from humiliation, protected his son from shame, and quietly stepped into a misunderstanding that would change all 3 of their lives forever. For a few seconds, no one moved, not because they understood what Vivian had done, but because they understood what her name could do. The same guard who had reached for Marcus now stepped aside as if the floor beneath him had changed ownership. The physician crouched lower, no longer speaking over Marcus but listening to him. "How long has he been struggling?" "Under 2 minutes. Does he have an inhaler?" "Side pocket of his backpack, gray zipper." "Any triggers? Dust? Cold air? Anything?" Crowds staring at him. The physician paused at that last part, and for the first time he looked at Eli like a child instead of a symptom. Vivian noticed. Marcus noticed too, but he didn't smile. He was too focused on the rhythm of his son's breathing, on the small rise and fall beneath his palm, on the way Eli's eyes searched his face for permission to be safe. The door gave way with a metallic groan. Cool air moved across the marble floor. Eli took one uneven breath, then another. Marcus counted softly beside him. 1, 2, 3. Good, bud. Again. Vivian stayed where she was, one knee on the floor in a gown worth more than Marcus's van. Her hand still rested near Eli's shoulder. She didn't pretend to be useful. She didn't make the moment about herself. She simply remained, and sometimes remaining is the first form of grace. Around them, the ballroom slowly remembered how to breathe. A woman in pearls lowered her phone. A man from the hospital board cleared his throat and looked away, ashamed he'd nearly filmed a child's fear as entertainment. The quartet found its place again, a soft note drawing through the room like light through rain. When Eli finally whispered, "Dad, I'm okay," Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. Not long enough to cry, just long enough to register whatever mercy had passed through that room without asking permission. Vivian heard the whisper and felt something tighten in her chest. She had stood in rooms with senators, surgeons, billionaires, and judges, but she had rarely seen a man hold steady under humiliation without turning it into pride. Marcus didn't ask who she was. He didn't thank her for saving his dignity. He didn't perform gratitude for the wealthy. He only helped Eli sit up and brushed a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "You scared me, kiddo," he said. Eli tried to smile. "You said no attention." "I said you needed air more than attention. Everybody looked anyway." Marcus glanced around the ballroom, then back at him. "Then let them learn something." Vivian lowered her gaze, because that sentence found a place in her she'd kept locked for years. Across the room, Roland Ashby watched with a stiff smile and cold eyes. He had built Vivian's public image like a glass tower, elegant, distant, untouched. Now, in less than 5 minutes, a facilities technician with worn boots and a frightened son had made her look human. And the worst part wasn't that people believed Marcus was with her. The worst part was that Vivian had allowed it, and something in her face said she wasn't sorry. Marcus helped Eli to his feet only when the physician nodded it was safe. He lifted the boy's backpack from beneath a small velvet chair, found the inhaler in the gray zipper pocket, and checked the label twice, the way a man checks a lock at midnight when his whole world is sleeping behind the door. Vivian stood beside them, close enough to help, far enough not to crowd them. "Thank you," Marcus said. But the words came with careful distance, the kind a working man learns in expensive rooms. "You didn't have to do that." Vivian looked toward the donors, pretending not to stare. "Yes, I did." "No, ma'am." He adjusted Eli's collar. "You could have corrected him." For the first time that evening, Vivian didn't answer quickly. The chandeliers glowed above them, soft and golden. But behind that glow, she could feel the old machinery of judgment turning, names, titles, net worth, proper circles, people deciding who belonged before they ever heard a person speak. She looked down at Eli, who was now holding one of Vivian's fingers with small, embarrassed trust. "He was scared," Vivian said quietly. Marcus followed her gaze. Eli looked away, as if fear itself were something to apologize for. "He gets embarrassed after an attack," Marcus said. "Thinks people will think he's weak." Vivian's face softened in a way the cameras had never captured. "I know what that feels like." Marcus looked up then, not with suspicion but with surprise. Vivian Calloway, the woman on magazine covers, whose signature could move millions before lunch, had said it like a confession, not a slogan. A server passed behind them carrying silver trays of sparkling water. The ice rattled gently in the glasses. Somewhere near the stage, a donor laughed too loudly, trying to push the room back into comfort. But Vivian stayed in the uncomfortable truth. "When I was 9, she said, my father brought me to a benefit dinner in Seattle. I spilled wine on my dress. Nothing terrible, just wine." But the room went quiet, and I remember every adult face turning toward me as if I'd proven something they already believed. Eli glanced up. What did they believe? Vivian smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. That children should be perfect if they're going to be allowed near important people. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's a cruel thing to teach a kid. "It is. Did anyone help you?" Vivian looked across the ballroom at the banners carrying her family name, at the trustees who smiled when money was near and disappeared when kindness was required. "No," she said. "They corrected me." The silence after that was small, but holy. Marcus didn't fill it. He'd learned that some pain doesn't need advice. It only needs room. Eli took a shy breath and whispered, "You can hold my drawing if you want." From his backpack, he pulled a folded paper covered in colored pencil lines. A building with tall windows, warm lights, and 3 stick figures standing under one roof. Vivian accepted it like it was worth more than any check written that night. And across the room, Roland Ashby saw the exchange, saw Vivian smile at a technician's son, and understood something dangerous had happened. She hadn't just protected them from shame. She had let them into the part of her no board member had ever been allowed to touch. Roland crossed the ballroom with the practiced calm of a man who never hurried unless someone else was watching. His tuxedo was pressed, his smile polished, his eyes cold enough to make warmth feel like a mistake. He stopped beside Vivian just as Eli folded his hands behind his back, suddenly aware another adult had entered the small circle of safety. "Vivian," Roland said, his voice smooth and low. "May I borrow you for a moment?" Marcus stepped back immediately, not from fear, but because men like him knew how quickly kindness could be accused of reaching too far. "We should go," he said softly to Eli. Vivian turned. "You don't have to leave." Roland gave a quiet laugh, the kind meant to sound harmless to everyone except the person it was aimed at. "I'm sure Mr. Doyle has duties. The East Wing breakers still need checking, don't they?" Marcus looked at him for 1 second, then nodded. "They do." Eli's hand slipped into his father's. Vivian saw it, that small act of retreat, and something in her tightened. Roland leaned closer, lowering his voice so the donors would only see elegance, not pressure. "You need to correct this before it grows legs." Vivian didn't look away from Marcus and Eli. "Correct what?" "The misunderstanding. The child had a medical scare, and you told an entire ballroom his father was with you." "He was." Roland's smile thinned. "Don't play with words. You know what they heard." Around them, whispers began stitching through the room. The trustee near the silent auction glanced at Marcus's scuffed boots. A woman with a diamond bracelet murmured behind her hand. A younger donor lifted his phone, then thought better of it when Vivian's eyes moved his way. The rumor was no longer a spark. It was smoke finding curtains. Roland kept his voice calm, but his words sharpened. "Your brand is discipline, independence, control. You're not a small-town fairy tale, Vivian. You're the face of a national foundation. You cannot afford to look emotionally compromised by a maintenance man and his son." Marcus heard enough. He didn't turn around. He simply knelt and retied Eli's loose shoelace, slow and careful, as if dignity could be practiced in small knots. Eli whispered, "Dad, did we do something wrong?" Marcus's fingers paused only for a breath. "No, bud." "Then why's he mad?" Marcus finished the bow and tapped the toe of Eli's shoe. "Some people get nervous when kindness makes more sense than money." Vivian heard that too. She looked at Roland, really looked at him, at the man who had spent months shaping her speeches, choosing her gowns, trimming every honest edge from her public life, until she looked impressive and felt invisible. "Not yet," she said. "Not yet," I said. "I'm not correcting anything yet." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You're making a mistake." Vivian's fingers closed lightly around Eli's drawing. The paper was soft from being folded too many times, its warm windows bright beneath the ballroom lights. "Maybe," she said, "but for once it feels like my mistake." Roland stepped back, the smile returning for the benefit of the room. But his eyes had changed. He'd come to manage a rumor. Now he saw a threat, not in Marcus's clothes, not in Eli's innocence, not even in Vivian's quiet refusal. The threat was that for the first time in years, Vivian Calloway had chosen grace over image, and Roland Ashby knew that if she kept choosing that way, he would lose more than control of the evening. By the time Marcus and Eli reached the edge of the ballroom, the room had learned how to smile at them without kindness. That was the strange cruelty of polished places. No one pointed. No one shouted. They simply made space around a person until the space itself became an insult. Marcus felt it in the way conversations dipped as he passed, in the way eyes lowered to his work jacket, his tool belt, the boots he'd bought at a discount store outside Beaverton 2 winters ago. Eli felt it too, because children often hear judgment before adults admit they've spoken. "Dad," he whispered, "are they looking at your boots?" Marcus glanced down as if he'd forgotten he had feet. "Probably." "Why?" "Because they squeak when I walk." Eli almost smiled. "They don't." "They do when I dance." "You don't dance." "Not in public. I save my best moves for kitchens and grocery aisles." A laugh slipped out of him, small but real, and it reached Vivian across the room like a match struck in a dark hallway. She turned from Roland just enough to see Marcus lift one shoulder in a ridiculous little shimmy that made Eli cover his mouth with both hands. He wasn't trying to charm the room. He was trying to give his son back the part of himself panic had stolen. Near the silent auction table, the silver-haired donor named Constance Ryerson stepped into Marcus's path with a crystal glass in hand and curiosity dressed up as manners. "Mr. Doyle, is it?" Marcus stopped. "Yes, ma'am." "And what exactly do you do for Miss Calloway?" The words were smooth, but the question underneath them wasn't. Marcus heard the hidden version clearly. "What are you doing here? What did you take? Why did she defend you?" Eli pressed closer to his side. Marcus rested a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Tonight I'm checking breakers, doors, and exit lights." Constance's smile tightened. "How practical." A younger man beside her chuckled. "Well, every Cinderella story needs someone from the loading dock." The little circle laughed softly. Not loud enough to be rude, just loud enough to wound. Marcus didn't answer right away. The chandeliers glittered above him. The marble floor held every reflection except his dignity, and still he stood straight. "Cinderella had a deadline," he said calmly. "I have a son who needs to be home by 9:30. Eli looked up at him, unsure whether that was funny, then decided it was and smiled again. Vivian saw Constance's expression falter. She saw the young man look into his drink as if the ice had suddenly become fascinating. She also saw Roland watching, waiting for Marcus to become angry, defensive, small. But Marcus refused to hand him that gift. The reporter from a local lifestyle outlet drifted closer, badge swinging from her neck. "Mr. Doyle, how long have you known Miss Calloway?" Marcus's eyes moved briefly to Vivian, then back. "Long enough to know she helped my son when it mattered. And before tonight, I knew her name from the banners." The reporter blinked. It wasn't the answer she wanted, because it couldn't be twisted without revealing the cruelty of the question. Vivian felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been tied too tightly for years. This man wasn't polished. He wasn't trained. He didn't speak in boardroom language or PR phrasing. Yet every answer carried more respect than the speeches written by men who charged by the hour. Then Eli tugged Marcus's sleeve and whispered, "Can we go fix the lights now?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, bud." But before they could leave, the ballroom lights flickered once, then again. On the stage, the giant screen behind the donation counter went black, and the room filled with the sudden silence of rich people realizing that money cannot command electricity to behave. Roland turned sharply toward the technicians. Vivian turned toward Marcus. Marcus looked at the dead screen, then at the emergency lights glowing faintly along the exits, then at the east wing, where a service panel sat behind a decorative curtain no guest had noticed all night. His expression changed. Not panic, not surprise. Recognition, quiet, steady, and grave. "Dad," Eli whispered. "Stay with Miss Calloway," he said. Vivian stepped closer. "What is it?" Marcus kept his voice low. That screen shouldn't have gone dark from a simple overload. The house lights and the donation display are on separate circuits. Roland appeared beside them before Vivian could answer, his calm now sharpened into performance. "This is exactly why we need the emergency systems contract approved tonight." He turned toward the nearest board members, raising his voice just enough. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We anticipated the possibility of infrastructure failure." Marcus looked at him then, not accusing, not impressed, just still. "You anticipated this?" Roland's smile didn't move. "We prepare for everything." "Then your technicians should know the backup relay isn't in the main booth." Roland blinked once. "Excuse me?" Marcus pointed toward the east wing. "It's in that panel. Whoever killed the screen didn't trip the ballroom circuit. They cut the auxiliary feed between the stage display and the donation server." The technicians near the stage exchanged looks. One of them, a young man with a headset and panic in his eyes, said, "That's impossible. That panel was locked all night." Marcus didn't argue. He walked to the curtain, took the maintenance key from his belt, and opened the metal door. The hinge gave a tired creak. Inside, the wiring should have been neat, labeled, untouched. Instead, One small bypass switch had been pulled halfway down and taped in place with a strip of black electrical tape. Marcus stared at it for a long second, and the room seemed to lean toward him. "This wasn't age," he said. "This was hands." A murmur moved through the donors. Vivian felt it pass behind her like cold wind under a door. Roland stepped forward quickly. "That's a reckless statement from someone who may not understand the larger system." Marcus turned slightly. "I understand enough not to tape a bypass switch unless I want a failure to happen after the room fills up." "Are you accusing someone?" Roland asked. "No." Marcus removed the tape carefully, holding it by the clean edge. "I'm saying wires don't get embarrassed and sabotage themselves." A few nervous laughs rose and died almost instantly. Vivian looked from the panel to Roland, and for the first time his confidence looked less like leadership and more like a locked room with something hidden inside. Marcus reset the switch. The screen flickered, flashed blue, then returned to life. The donation total reappeared above the stage, frozen at $3. Applause began, uncertain at first, then growing. But Marcus didn't turn toward it. He studied the inside of the panel again, following the cable path with his eyes. "There's more," he said quietly. Vivian moved beside him. "More what?" He reached behind the lower bracket and pulled out a small adhesive access tag, the kind used by temporary contractors. It hadn't been there during his earlier inspection. Printed across it was the logo of Ashby Strategic Security, Roland's company. The applause thinned into silence. Roland's face changed for only a moment, but Marcus saw it. And so did Vivian. "Ashby," Marcus said, his voice calm enough to make the words heavier. "Why would your security team need access to a maintenance panel before the contract was approved?" No one spoke. Not the trustees, not the donors, not the reporter holding her recorder halfway to her chest. Even Eli stood silent beside Vivian, clutching the folded drawing like it had become a prayer. In that quiet, Vivian finally understood the shape of the evening. The panic, the pressure, the sudden solution Roland had ready to sell. And Marcus Doyle, the man they'd mistaken for someone beneath the room, had just found the truth hiding behind the wall. Roland Ashby recovered the way men like him often do. Not with truth, but with volume wrapped in manners. "That tag proves nothing," he said, smoothing a hand over his tuxedo. "My team inspected this property last week at the Foundation's request." Standard risk assessment. Vivian didn't answer. Marcus didn't either. He simply held the strip of black tape in one hand and the access tag in the other. Two small objects suddenly heavier than all the silver centerpieces in the room. A trustee named Harold Whitmore stepped forward, his face pale beneath the ballroom lights. "Vivian, perhaps we should move this discussion somewhere private." "Why?" Vivian asked. "Because donors are watching." They were watching when a child couldn't breathe. Harold swallowed. "That's not what I meant." "I know exactly what you meant." The room fell quieter. Roland's gaze moved to the reporter, then to the board members, then back to Vivian with a warning hidden behind his smile. "This foundation cannot survive drama. We have a children's clinic partnership waiting on tonight's funds. We have hospital administrators in this room. We have press. You need to step on that stage, reassure everyone, and stop letting this man turn a technical issue into a personal crusade." Marcus looked down at Eli, whose fingers had tightened around the hem of his sleeve. His eyes were no longer frightened from the asthma attack. They were frightened from understanding too much. Marcus lowered his voice. "Miss Calloway, he's right about one thing. Your foundation matters more than me." Vivian turned to him sharply. "Don't say that." "I'm not saying I don't matter. I'm saying I know what rooms like this do when they need someone to blame." Eli whispered, "Dad, are they going to blame you?" Marcus knelt in front of him, blocking the harsh lights with his shoulders. "They can try, but you didn't do anything." "That's not always what protects people." Vivian felt those words land like a bell inside her. Truth didn't always protect people. Money did. Names did. Cameras did. And too often, silence protected the wrong person. Roland leaned closer to Vivian, his voice now low enough to be almost private. "Choose carefully. You can have a clean evening, a signed contract, and $4 million secured. Or you can stand beside a maintenance worker you met 20 minutes ago and let every headline tomorrow ask why you lied about him being with you. Marcus rose slowly. We should go, Eli. Vivian stepped in front of him. No. Marcus's expression softened, but his voice stayed steady. You don't owe us anything. That's where you're wrong. Before she could say more, Eli tugged at his backpack and pulled out the folded drawing Vivian had held earlier. I saw him, he said. His voice was small, but it crossed the circle like a candle in a dark church. Everyone looked at him. Marcus's face changed. Eli pointed to the colored pencil lines. When I was waiting by the coats, I drew the lights because the ceiling looked like stars. That man went behind the curtain before the screen broke. He pointed, not with anger but with the innocence of a child who hadn't yet learned that powerful people expect fear. Roland's smile vanished. Marcus gently lowered the boy's hand. A kid should never have to prove what adults are afraid to admit. Vivian looked at the drawing, at the tiny figure Eli had sketched near the east wing, at the time written in green pencil because Eli liked marking moments, 6 minutes before the screen went black. Vivian took the drawing with both hands. Then the MC tapped the microphone on stage and announced that Miss Calloway would now address the room. Roland exhaled as if victory had arrived. Marcus reached for Eli's hand, ready to disappear before the room could swallow them whole. But Vivian didn't move away from them. She walked toward the stage, holding the drawing, the access tag, and the quiet fury of every child who had ever been corrected instead of protected. Vivian stepped onto the stage with no music behind her, no speechwriter beside her, and no Roland whispering the safe words into her ear. The ballroom lights had returned, but they no longer felt warm. They felt honest, exposing every face, every tightened jaw, every donor pretending not to enjoy the discomfort of someone else's truth. Marcus stood near the east wing with Eli's hand in his, already half turned toward the exit. He knew that posture well. The quiet readiness of people who had learned not to wait around for grace. Roland stood near the front table, smiling again, because men like him believed a stage belonged to whoever could control the story first. Vivian touched the microphone. A soft crackle moved through the speakers. Earlier tonight, she began, someone asked me whether Marcus Doyle was with me. A ripple passed through the room. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. Eli looked up at him. Roland's smile sharpened, satisfied. This was the correction he'd demanded. This was the clean ending, the public separation, the polished return to order. Vivian looked directly at Marcus, then at Eli, then back at the crowd. I didn't correct them, she said, because for the first time tonight, someone in this room was actually standing with me. The silence came fast. Not polite silence, not confused silence. The kind that makes champagne glasses stop halfway to lips. Roland's smile disappeared so quickly it almost looked like pain. Vivian lifted Eli's drawing. This was made by an 8-year-old boy. While most of us were busy deciding who looked important enough to trust, he drew the ceiling lights because he thought they looked like stars. He also drew the east wing at 8:42 tonight. She turned the paper toward the audience, and the large screen behind her displayed a live camera close-up. There it was, in green pencil and crooked lines, the curtain, the service panel, and a tall man in a dark tuxedo standing where no guest should have been. Vivian placed the access tag beside the drawing. 7 minutes later, our donation display failed. We were then urged to approve an emergency security contract from Ashby Strategic Security. A murmur rose, low and uneasy. Roland stepped forward. Vivian, this is reckless. She didn't look at him. No, Roland. Reckless is frightening a room full of donors so you can sell them certainty. Reckless is treating a children's foundation like a personal account. Reckless is assuming a man in work boots would be too invisible to notice what you hid behind a wall. Marcus lowered his head. Not in shame, but in the old discipline of a man who refused to make another person's fall his celebration. Vivian continued, her voice steady now, almost gentle. Mr. Doyle did not ask for attention. He did not ask for payment. He did not ask me to defend him. He saw a child who needed air, a system that had been tampered with, and a truth that deserved daylight. The board members looked at Roland. The donors looked at Roland. The reporter raised her recorder, no longer hunting for gossip, but for history. Roland tried to speak, but no sentence found him. Vivian turned to the security director. Please preserve the maintenance panel, the contractor logs, and all hallway footage from 8 o'clock onward. No documents leave this building tonight. Then she looked back at the ballroom. And as for Marcus Doyle, he is not a scandal. He is not a scandal. He is not a rumor for you to dress up and laugh at between courses. Her eyes softened when they found Eli. He is a father who kept his son calm when the rest of us forgot how to be human. No one applauded at first. They couldn't. The truth had entered too quietly and taken every chair. Marcus squeezed Eli's hand. Eli whispered, "Dad, everybody's quiet." Marcus looked at Vivian standing alone beneath the white lights, holding a child's drawing like sacred evidence, and answered softly. That's what happens when respect finally walks into the room. The applause came late, and maybe that was why it felt honest. It didn't burst from the room like celebration. It rose slowly, uncertain at first, then steadier. As people began to understand, they weren't clapping for a speech. They were clapping because a man they had dismissed had protected a child, a foundation, and the truth without once asking to be seen. Roland Ashby was escorted from the front table by the security director, not in chaos, not in spectacle, but in the quiet unraveling that follows a lie when it runs out of polished language. Vivian stepped down from the stage while board members gathered around her with questions, apologies, and sudden concern. But she moved past them all. She walked straight to Marcus and Eli. Marcus stood near the exit, his tool bag in one hand, his son's backpack over one shoulder, looking like a man who still expected the world to send him back through the service door. Vivian stopped in front of him. For a moment, neither spoke. The ballroom behind them was full of people, yet the space between them felt strangely peaceful. "You could have left," Vivian said. Marcus glanced at Eli. "I thought about it." "Why did you stay?" He looked toward the stage, then down at his old boots. Everyone had already noticed for the wrong reasons. "Because my son was watching." Vivian nodded slowly, something in her eyes softening beyond gratitude. "So was I." Eli tugged gently on Marcus's sleeve. "Dad, can we go home now?" Marcus checked his watch. "We're already past 9:30. "Are you mad?" "No, bud. Just tired." Vivian knelt slightly, still holding the folded drawing. "May I keep this for tonight? I promise I'll return it." Eli thought about it with great seriousness. "Only if you don't let the rich people frame it crooked." Marcus gave a quiet laugh before he could stop himself. Vivian laughed too, a real laugh that surprised the room more than her speech had. Later, after statements were taken and the last donors drifted into the cold Portland night, Marcus and Eli reached the parking lot to find his old pickup refusing to start. The air was sharp, carrying the smell of rain coming off the coast. Marcus turned the key again. The engine clicked once and gave up. Eli sighed. "Maybe the truck's tired too." Marcus rested his forehead against the wheel. "That makes two of us." A soft knock came at the window. Vivian stood outside, no longer surrounded by assistants or cameras, her ivory gown covered by a simple wool coat. She had taken off her heels and carried them in one hand. "May I wait with you?" she asked. Marcus opened the door slowly. "People will talk." Vivian looked at Eli in the passenger seat, then at Marcus, then at the quiet lot glowing under sodium lights. "Let them," she said. For once, they were closer to the truth than they knew. Eli smiled and pulled another drawing from his backpack, this one with 3 figures beneath one roof, every window colored gold. Marcus looked at it for a long time. Vivian did too. No promise was made that night. No fairy tale rushed ahead of grace. But something had begun, gently, honestly, in the cold beside an old truck that wouldn't start. And sometimes redemption doesn't arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes as a woman choosing not to correct kindness, a father choosing dignity over anger, and a child drawing a home before the adults are brave enough to believe in one. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments what moment stayed with you most, and whether you believe dignity can change the way a room sees a person. Thank you for watching until the very end.